And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome to the show for the first time, United States Senator Dick Durbin, represents the state of Illinois, is chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and Majority Whip. Senator Durbin, thanks for joining us on the show. It's really great to have you.
I'm glad to be with you.
First of all, I just want to say, as a Muslim, thank you for standing with our community so much. I spoke at a Muslim event in Chicago a few years ago, and you were there at that event, and people speak so highly of you for your interaction with our community and standing up for our community against bigotry for years. So I start off by saying thank you for that.
Happy to do it.
So let's talk about the big issues that before your committee a lot. Justice Clarence Thomas and Harlan Crow. I saw that recently you're on the floor criticizing Harlan Crow for refusing to voluntarily speak to your committee. What happens now?
Well, Dean, just think for a moment. If I said we've got 2 weeks around the 4th of July when the Senate's not in session, and coincidentally, I've decided to take a little trip. A friend of mine has a chartered jet, and he's going to take me over to Europe. And then we have a yacht that's 200 foot long. We're going to be cruising around the Mediterranean. And just want to let you know, I won't be back in the state of Illinois during that period of time. And oh, no, I'm not going to tell you who it is who's taking me on this little trip, nor how much it's going to cost. It's none of your damn business. Now, if I said that, people would say, well, you must be a one-term senator because that kind of conduct is unacceptable in a transparent democracy. Now apply it to the highest court in the land, 9 individuals, and we have at least ample evidence that one of those justices on the Supreme Court did just what I said and never disclosed it. It's got to be worth, we think, the totals hundreds of thousands of dollars, all the trips that he's taken. You just can't have a democracy and accountability in our government with that kind of attitude. So we've asked Harlan Crow, tell us what happened. What did you do? He said, well, basically, it's none of your business. And Clarence Thomas, of course, has said the same thing. We're not going to stop at this. If they won't come clean and come up with a code of ethics and disclosure in the highest court in our land, they're not entitled to have the lowest standard of ethics. We're going to go ahead and try to pass a law to impose that obligation on him.
That's vitally important. And I mean, the idea of like, we would all like our own Harlan Crow, someone who puts us on great trips, buys our mom a house, pays for our kids to go to school, and wants nothing in return. That's just remarkable, isn't it? So, well,
you know, I guess it is possible that is true, but you know, if there's accountability in a government, you disclose that to the public and say, and take a look at all my rulings in court, see if there's any conflict. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Because of Clarence Thomas and the questions that have been raised, the reputation of the United States Supreme Court is at one of the lowest points in history.
Yep.
I think it all gets back to the Chief Justice, John Roberts. And I've said over and over again, he has the power and the authority to solve this problem this morning before lunch. He can decide there'll be a code of ethics and a standard where the justices are going to say to the American people, take a look at our lives and decide whether there was any conflict of interest. He ought to do this. This is the Roberts Court. It's how it'll be remembered in history. And if it's remembered as a court that cut corners when it came to ethics, he's going to have a very bad experience.
I'm sending with Senator Dick Durbin. Senator, let me ask you a question listeners have raised to me, the idea of the Senate Judiciary Committee, either behind closed doors or in the public, actually subpoenaing Justice Clarence Thomas. Is that even something in the possible realm?
I'm not ruling out anything, but I will tell you that the likelihood of that is limited. There's only been one attempt that we can find in modern history when that was attempted. It was in the 1950s when the House of Representatives was looking for a communist in the government. And they decided to serve a subpoena on a Supreme Court justice and tell him to appear before committee. And he basically told him to go jump in the lake. He wasn't going to show up, and that was the end of the story. So we don't want to harken back to that kind of a precedent. We'd much rather have cooperation voluntarily. And I don't expect Clarence Thomas to do anything other than what the law requires, and that is to disclose publicly to the American people what happened.
We all do. And, you know, I just saw you speaking yesterday about the need for ethics rules for the Supreme Court, and that it's remarkable to us as people learn that the lower courts in the federal judiciary are held to a higher standard than the highest court in the land. It makes no sense. And you've touched on the fact the Supreme Court now, the lowest confidence of Americans per Gallup that we've ever seen in the modern era. What can you help us understand why Chief Justice Roberts would not just immediately just set forth ethics rules to give more confidence in the court?
Well, I'm sure it's not easy to bargain with 8 other Supreme Court justices. And I'm sure there's a lot involved, some personal in terms of their friendship, relationship, and like. Some of it may be an opinion that's pending, where Chief Justice Roberts needs the vote of one of these justices who doesn't want their life to be exposed to the American people. I mean, there could be a variety of circumstances. But the bottom line is, if Chief Justice Roberts leaves this court in shambles in terms of their national reputation, because he didn't step up and do the right thing, the proper thing, the tough thing to do, then that's going to be his place in history. I wouldn't want it. I hope he doesn't.
I agree with you. And, shifting gears a little bit, still talking about the judiciary, GOP Senator J.D. Vance, in response to the indictment by DOJ of Donald Trump, he said he's going to hold up Merrick Garland's appointments to the DOJ. We're going to grind his department to a halt. What's your reaction to a fellow senator saying this?
Well, I can just tell you something. He's new to the Senate, but he's an educated man, a successful author, an attorney. He has to know that the Department of Justice is involved in critical work to keep Americans safe, fighting the fentanyl crisis and narcotics, dealing with treason in our ranks of people who are selling America's secrets and compromising our security. I mean, when you get down to the bottom line, if you say you're a law and order member of Congress, then stopping the daily workings of the Department of Justice is just the opposite. It is an irresponsible thing to do. If we want to be safe, we have to give law enforcement, particularly the Department of Justice, the authority and the resources to do the job.
It's a remarkable time to live through, as we're living through history, huge swaths of history that we've never seen before. And if the indictment of Donald Trump being one, and some of the response to Republicans. A last issue I want to touch on, this is really important in that it's talked about more and more, AI. And I know that the Senate Judiciary has held hearings on it. Senator Schumer, I believe, from what I read, had a briefing. There's some good things for AI. We just learned Paul McCartney said he's going to release a new Beatles song that has been created by AI literally this fall. I'm not kidding, with John Lennon's voice, AI. So there might be some good things with Gmail, but there's grave concerns we have. We're even being warned by people creating AI that they have fears of what it could do to humanity. So what can the Senate do?
Well, Dean, let me tell you something. I'm a liberal arts major, law graduate, and I don't profess to be an expert in technology. I've struggled along to make sure that you and I have this Zoom operation this morning, and everything seems to be working just right.
It is.
We are going through a period I've never seen in the Senate. I've been around here for more than 20 years, a period of education. Yesterday, I had a hearing and Judiciary Committee together with two separate seminars, all on artificial intelligence. I can't remember a time, except when we were at war, when we focus so much on one subject as we are on artificial intelligence. I think we should, because there are pluses and minuses, and some of the minuses are scary as hell. The pluses are that we're going to finally find resources to answer some hard questions, some things that we want answers to immediately: how to cure a disease, the proper medication for a situation, how to monitor a person's health to see early warning signs of problems that could be part of AI. On the other hand, this artificial intelligence can result in the so-called deep fakes, where they can take your voice and your image and put it on the screen saying exactly the opposite of what you believe. In politics, we worry about that every single day. The average citizen says, so what? Let the politicians wrestle with it and sweat over it. That's their business. But it could happen in a way that affects you personally. We had a hearing yesterday where a woman had her daughter's voice stolen, and an appeal made to her over the telephone that her daughter was in grave danger. And it wasn't until an hour later that she located her daughter and found out this was a hoax. Of course, the people involved in the hoax wanted money from her, and a lot of people fall for it. It happens all the time. It's going to get progressively worse, and to a greater degree. Yes, we got to take it seriously. I can never remember a time when the private sector came to Congress and said, regulate us, but we're hearing that more and more.
And I read about that woman's story. A very last thing. I mean, look, there's been a lot of hearings on big tech, and it seems consensus on ways to protect minors from certain things Instagram was doing with their algorithms. Yet we don't see legislation. Are you hopeful that in the Senate, I have more confidence in the Senate finding common ground, but that the House controlled by the GOP, you can do something to protect the public from the potential downsides of AI.
It remains to be seen what the House of Representatives is going to do. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee is focused on impeachment, and he can do that if he wishes. But we have focused on trying to make sure that children's sexual abuse on the internet is changed dramatically for the better, protecting kids. We passed 5 bills, and this is a headline which you probably haven't read, which you should. 5 bills came out of the Senate Judiciary Committee on the subject of protecting kids on the internet, and they were unanimous. All 5 bills were unanimous. Let me tell you, if you take a look at the people who serve on the Senate Judiciary Committee, that is an amazing statement. We have folks on the far left and far right in that committee. They all agreed on it. So I think we ought to take something like that and get the job done.
I agree with you. And well, Senator Durbin, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for your support for my community, and hopefully we can chat again in the near future.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Dean.
Take care, Senator. Bye.